Hello, my name is Ali Sekman. I'm a professor of computer science at Tennessee State University. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can read data from a file and how you can write data into a file in Java programming. It's pretty simple. All right, so let's get started. This is for Comp 3110 Java programming class. Again, the topic is writing and reading files, and we are going to give you only fundamentals. We're not going to get into extremely details. So let's give some definitions. First, what's a stream? A stream is nothing but abstract representation of a source of data or destination of data. Okay, you can write data to a stream or you can read data from a stream. And we call them input streams or output streams. Input streams are read-only. If you want to read from a file, you do create an input stream. If you want to write into a file, you create an output stream. The first class, which is extremely important, is file class, which is located in java.io package. And it's an abstract representation of a file, basically. There are 4 constructors, and I'm going to give you 3 constructors here. The first one takes a string as input. The third one takes 2 strings as inputs. And then the second one takes a file object as the first parameter, and then a string as the second parameter. File class does not let you do the I/O, input-output processing. It is important. You do not change the contents of a file using a file class object. Okay, you cannot read from a file, or you cannot write into a file using file class. There's a lot of methods that enable you to look and modify file-related information, not the contents of the file. You can create a new file, for example, using file class. Or you can get the size of the file, or you can delete the file, you can create a new directory, and so on, but you do not modify the contents of the file with a file class object. Some of the methods are listed here. For example, delete deletes the file, last modified is obvious. Is it a file? Is it a directory? Can you read from this file? Can you write into the file? Does it exist? Can you rename the file to a new file? And so on. So you're going to get familiar with them as you need to use them. I will start with a very simple example. First, don't forget to import java.io package first of all. I create a file object, and I use the constructor that takes a string as input, cs.txt. So simply, and then I make a call to exist method. Remember, exist method returns a Boolean, true or false. As you would guess, it will check if there's a file called cs.txt in the current folder. If there is one, this returns true. If not, it returns false. Here, assume that I am in this folder currently, and say ls. ls is list all the files in that current folder. There's only one file called test.java. I don't have a file called cs.txt. And if I compile and run my program, it's going to go here. File that exists will be false. Therefore, it's going to go to else, and it will say file does not exist. Okay. How about here? Now I have 2 methods, exist and create new file. Exist returns Boolean or false. A Boolean variable is Boolean data type, false or true. And this one also returns Boolean, false or true. Okay. It will try to create a new file. If it can, it will return true. If it cannot, it will return false. For example, if the file already exists, it will not be able to create new file. But there is one thing that you need to pay attention. Create file method throws an I/O exception. If you recall from the previous video, when we discussed exception handling, there are 2 types of exceptions, checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. And if a method throws a checked exception, that method must be called in a try and catch block. Okay, so let's run this. If I compile, it will give you an error. It will say that create new file throws I/O exception. Therefore, you should basically call it in a try and catch block. Okay, or there's one more way. I will talk about it a little bit later. So in order to fix this, I'm going to go and place it in a try catch block right there. So now file exists, create new file. Exist method doesn't throw any exceptions, so I'm fine. But this one, create new file, throws IO exception, and I'm catching it, so I'm perfect okay at this point. Now, let's list what we have. We have test.class, test.java. Do I have a file called cs.txt? No. Then it will go here. File that exists will return false. Since it returns false, it will go to this line and it will execute it. It will say file does not exist. Then it will go right here and it will say file, create new file. Will it be able to create a new one? Yes, because the file doesn't exist. So this will return true. It will go to this line right there. And it will print what? File has been created. It's not going to go there. It's not going to go there. Now, if I list, it will list cs.txt, test.class, test.java. Now it created what? A file for me. Create new file method. Now, if I run it again, what's going to happen? Well, if I run it again, it will go here. It will go here. File that exists. This is going to return true. Since it's going to return true, it will go right there. And it will print what? File exists. Then it will go inside this. This time, file create new file will return false because file already exists. It will go to else. And it's going to print file cannot be created. Okay. Now, I already have cs.txt. I added just these two lines. Okay. It's exactly the same as before. So I'm going to go here, compile and run. We know that cs.txt exists because we just created it in the previous slide. Therefore, this will be false. It will say file does not, sorry, it will be true. File that exists will be true. It will say file exists here, file exists. And it will go here, try to create a new file. It will not be able to, and it will say file cannot be created. Then it says file.getName. GetName method is going to return the name of the file. And it is cs.txt, and then get absolute path is going to return the complete path of the file, okay? And it is under segment, which is the current user of the computer, desktop, and this folder, that folder, that folder, and it's located right there, okay? So we have a class called PrintWriter class, which is very useful. Now I'm going to try to write something into the file, okay? First, there are many constructors of PrintWriter. I'm going to bring up the definition of PrintWriter for you. Okay, if I go to a web browser and type PrintWriter Java and search for it, and it's going to bring you the documentation from Oracle for Java. Click the first one, and you're gonna see that PrintWriter class has a bunch of constructors right here, okay, right there. So the first constructor is what I'm interested in. I'm going to go and click on the first constructor. So let's see what we have in the, okay, let me go back. Okay, as you see, the first thing is that PrintWriter constructor throws file not found exception. File not found exception is an IO exception. It's a checked exception. In other words, if you want to create an object of PrintWriter class, you need to call it in try and catch block. That's the first thing. Second, what it does, if the file does not exist, a new file will be created for you. Okay? So PrintWriter takes a file object as input, and if that file does not exist physically, it will create it for you. Okay, so let's keep this one in mind. Okay, so therefore, I'm using try and catch to create a PrintWriter object. And PrintWriter constructor takes a file as input. What it does, it's going to check if the file exists. If it does not exist, it's going to create a file for me and get a pointer to the file. Now, from that pointer, I will be able to write into the file. I will be able to write data into the file. Okay, file not found exception. So now let's try, and here ls, that means in the current folder, I don't have a file called cs.txt. And I compile, I run, okay? When I run it, what it does, it creates a file object, and then it creates an object. So this is what happens. First, I have file object somewhere in the memory, and then I have obj somewhere else in the memory, and I use this file object to create this obj, okay? And now if I list, this time I will see cs.txt because this constructor automatically creates that file for me. Okay, let's refresh our exception handling a little bit. I said that since PrintWriter constructor throws an exception called file not found exception, I must call it a try and catch. There's another way. I may not put it in try and catch, but I tell that the main method may throw file not found exception, okay? So I'm gonna go here. Instead of this, these two are equivalent. Instead of try catch, put it there. I can move this file not found exception and say throws file not found exception for the main. In this one, in this case, this will be fine. If you do not remember this, please go to the previous video on exception handling. Okay. So now the same thing, ls, I don't have cs.txt. I compile, I run, and I list again. Now I have cs.txt. Okay. So from this point on with obj, I'm going to be able to write into the file. This is what I'm going to do exactly. Now, I think things will make sense to you slowly, okay? And recall that if you want to write something, we used to use system.out.println, right? So I guess you can now guess that system is a class and out is an output stream object, okay? So let's go to this one. I have main, I have to have throws file not found exception because I know that this guy is gonna throw file not found exception. So I'm gonna go here. Now println. Println is a method of what? PrintWriter class. And it's gonna go to that file inside the file that obj points to, and it's gonna have hello CS students, and go to next line. I hope you are enjoying so far. Go to next line, and it's gonna close that connection to the file. So if I say ls, I don't have cs.txt, I compile and I run. This time it created cs.txt, and the contents of cs.txt will be what? Hello CS students, I hope you're enjoying so far. Okay, println is a method of PrintWriter, okay? And then you can print into the file that obj points to. It's pretty simple. Okay, now assume that we already have a file called cs.txt, and assume that this is what I have. This is what I have before I run the program, okay? So the file exists and the file is not empty. And then I run this again. When I run it again, as you see here, obj, as soon as it creates obj, what is going to happen is the contents of cs.txt will be truncated. It will be deleted. And whatever you do, you're going to overwrite on that file. Okay? So this is important. If cs.txt exists and it has some data in it, everything will be erased and you're going to start from the first line. Is this something we want? Well, in some cases, yes, but some cases we don't. So how can we handle this? There's another class called FileWriter Class, okay? So now I want to go to FileWriter Class and give you the definition of it. I'm just going to go to a web browser and type FileWriter Java. It's going to bring the documentation. Click on the first one. As you see, these are the constructors of FileWriter class, okay? Let's see. Okay, one of the FileWriter constructors, as you see here, right there, takes the file name. So, okay, takes the file name and it's a Boolean, which is append. That means if you create a FileWriter object, if the second parameter is true, it is going to go and append to the file, okay? But if you don't have the second parameter, it's going to overwrite, or it's going to write over the file. So let's keep this one in detail. And also pay attention, there's one more detail. FileWriter constructor, the second constructor right here, throws an IO exception. So if I'm going to create a FileWriter object, I must use either try and catch block, or I should make that the method that makes that call throws IO exception. Okay, so now let's go back. Okay, if you recall, PrintWriter object, PrintWriter class throws file not found exception. FileWriter throws IO exception, but I know that IO exception is a superclass of what? File not found exception. Therefore, if I say throws IO exception, I also cover what PrintWriter throws. So therefore, just saying throws IO exception instead of throws IO exception or comma throws file not found exception, I just say throws IO exception, and it covers both of those two constructors for me. Okay, so here's what I do. I create a file object. So I have a file object, okay? And then I create an FWriter object. To create a FWriter object, I use what? This file object, and I say true. That means if I'm gonna write into this file from this point on, I'm gonna append. And then I create what? An OBJ, and I use this one as input to the constructor, okay? So OBJ is what I'm going to use to write into file. Now I'm gonna go and say println what is what? This is what we are adding. So let's go. Assume that I have cs.txt already exists. It says, hello CS students, I hope you're enjoying so far. It already exists. When I run this program, it's gonna go to this two line, those two was the contents of cs.txt. Now I'm going to add this line and this line, okay? And pay attention, I say throws IO exception. And I say true if I want to append to the file, okay? So now I do exactly the same thing, but this time I don't have comma true. So even though our previous cs.txt had some contents in it, they are all deleted, and now this is what you have. This is what we are adding. So previous contents of the cs.txt will be what? Overridden. Okay. Okay, FileReader class. So far we were able to write into the class, into the file. Now I'm going to see how I can read data from a class. In order to do that, I'm going to have FileReader class. Again, FileReader constructor throws an IO exception. Therefore, I should say either I should call FileReader in a try and catch block, or I should say main will may throw IO exception, throws IO exception. So I create file, and now this one. Okay, with scanner. So far, with scanner, we were doing this. Scanner, scan, new, scanner, system.in. With this one, we were able to read from keyboard. So the constructor of scanner class takes an object. And in that case, we give an input object, system.in. This was able to read from keyboard. But now I'm going to create a scanner object. And when I create the scanner object, the constructor will be fed with out file. This one, out file. Since out file is a reader file, scanner is not going to scan what I did type with keyboard. It's going to scan the contents of the file. Okay. So the file is cs.txt. I created a file reader object and I created a scanner. Now scan has next. What do you think has next is? Has next is going to return either true or false. If the file has a line, has next is going to return true. Okay, so it's going to scan through the contents of the file for me. Here, assume that cs.txt has 5 lines like this. Okay, so what I do here, first I create a file object, and then I create a file reader object, and then I create a scanner object, just like that. So scanner will scan the contents of the file, cs.txt. And then I have a string. Now scan has next. It's gonna go here, the first line. And has next is gonna return true because it has a line there. And then string will have next line. Next line is the method of what scanner class. It's going to read the entire line here. And it's going to be assigned to string. And it's going to print string. And then it's going to go back to the beginning of while. Has next. Yes, now we are here. It's going to get this one and print it. Go there, go there, go there. Finally, when we are done printing using FileReader, there is nothing else left. Has next will return false. Okay, and then this will print here when we compile and run. It's going to print the contents of this file right here. Don't forget to close. Okay, in the previous ones as well. You have to, for example, here, if you are writing, you still need to close. That means if you don't close, what happens? If someone else wants to access to cs.txt, that person will not be able to because you are locking the file. Okay, so in order to not to do that, you should always what? Close. For example, here you are trying to read. If someone else wants to somehow communicate with this file, will not be able to do it because you are locking that file at this point. I guess this is very simple, and I hope you fully understood, and you should do practice, but it's pretty simple. I'll see you in the next video.